Welcome to another exciting episode of Carving the Divine TV. My name is Yujiro Seki. I'm a director, writer, and the producer of the documentary Carving the Divine. Carving the Divine is about the Buddhist sculptors of Japan, and I'm ready to present it around the world. But before I do so, I thought it would be a great idea to introduce basic concept of Buddhism and the history of Buddhism, so that when you guys finally watch my documentary, you guys can watch at the maximum value. Today, we're going to be exploring something different. We're going to be talking about the Reiki. To be honest with you, I have no idea about the Reiki. I heard about the Reiki in the Western world, but I never heard about the Reiki when I was in Japan. I heard it's very useful. And today, we're going to be talking about the Reiki in relationship with the Buddhism. But as you know, I have no idea how to start. So I invited somebody who can talk about this. I would love to introduce to you Master Frans Stiene. Welcome to our show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm very excited about it.
Great. So I know you are very famous in your community, but just in case for the people who don't know anything about you, please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm originally from the Netherlands. I, at the moment, live again in Holland. I moved to India when I was in my 30s, and I lived there for 2 years, for 1 year in the Himalaya, and looking at healing, Buddhism, etc. And then I moved to Australia and lived there for 20 years, where I had a Reiki center and a meditation center in Sydney and in the Blue Mountains. And about 3.5 years ago, I moved back to Holland. So interesting journey. I've been practicing and teaching the system of Reiki for the last 25 years worldwide. And I'm also training in Japan with a Japanese priest, what has been absolutely amazing and really helps me to deepen my practice and also see the roots of the system of Reiki.
Wonderful. So I have a burning question for you. So what is Reiki?
That is a big question. So a lot of people think that Reiki is hands-on healing. But for me, the system of Reiki is quite more than hands-on healing. It's a spiritual practice. And therefore, I always see it in two things. We have Reiki, meaning really our true essence, our true nature, or Buddha nature, we can say. What is a beautiful, great, bright light, luminosity, compassion, and kindness. But to be able to lay that bare, we have the system of Reiki. And the system of Reiki consists of 5 very specific elements. And that is meditation practices, precepts, you see them behind me, hands-on healing, symbols and mantras where you can chant and focus on, and something called Reiju in Japanese. And in modern ways, it's been translated as attunement or initiation. But yeah, really almost like in Japanese kaji, like a blessing, a healing, and empowerment to help us to practice and remember that we are this great bright light, that we are Buddha nature.
Sounds very complicated. Buddha nature, huh?
I think it's actually quite simple. I think we make it complicated.
So again, speaking of Buddha nature, how does Reiki relate to Buddhism?
So the founder of the system of Reiki, Mikasui, he practiced Buddhism. And it is said that he was a Tendai Buddhist. He practiced on Mount Karama, Mount Hiei, near Kyoto. And so when we look at the system of Reiki, we see, for example, very specific tools and teachings which relate back to Japanese Buddhism. For example, you have behind you Dainichi no-rei and Fudomyo, and they are traditionally related to one very specific teachings within the system of Reiki. A lot of modern Reiki teachers or even Japanese teachers within the system of Reiki don't really teach this or know about it, but we can really see this link with it. And for me, therefore, the system of Reiki is really about becoming Dainichi no-rei or becoming Fudomyo. And what does that mean is, for example, we see Fudomyo with a sword and the flames behind you, and it's about burning away and cutting away all our worries, all our anger, all our fear, all our attachment, all our resentment, so that our luminosity, our great bright light, can shine forward. And then we can ask ourselves, what is that great bright light? Buddha nature ultimately is love and compassion, it's kindness. And within the system of Reiki, we have the precepts, and precepts, as we also have in Buddhism, for example. And the precepts are very simple within the system of Reiki. Do not anger, do not worry, be grateful, be true to your way and your being, and be compassionate to yourself and others. But as we all know, that is not that easy. It's very difficult to implement that in our daily life. Therefore, we need very specific meditation practices. We need very specific tools to focus on. So, for example, one of the other tools we focus on within the system of Reiki is the Hri or Kiriku, what is a Japanese symbol, a seed syllable, what really links to Amida Buddha. And so we can see these traces of Buddhism within the system of Reiki. What does it mean when we focus on that symbol of Ri, Kiriku of Amida Buddha? Amida is infinite light. So it's really that we realize that our true nature is infinite, is light, is wisdom, is compassion and kindness. And that for me is really important. Of course, all the deities here are important, all the symbols are important, all the mantras here are important, all the practices are important. But what is most important is to realize that they're fingers pointing to our true human nature, our basic human compassion and kindness.
Very impressive. So for you, why Reiki? I know there are many practices out there within Buddhism as well, but you chose to do Reiki. So why Reiki?
That's a really interesting question. I often ask that myself too. When I lived in India, I lived in first in the Himalayas for a long time, and somehow I came across a book about Reiki, and also, of course, lots of Tibetan Buddhism there. I really enjoyed that. I really gravitated towards the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. And I started to practice a little bit of Reiki, met a Reiki teacher. For me, there was something in it, but the guy who was teaching at that time, it was very modernized. It didn't, I felt there was something missing. And one of the aspects of hands-on the system of Reiki is hands-on healing. And I remember being in Darjeeling, and a Tibetan Buddhist reincarnated Tulku was a friend of mine, became a friend, and he said, so what is Reiki exactly? And I was very ignorant. I'm still ignorant. And I said, oh, you go with your hands like this. And he said, oh, like this. And he put his hands towards me, and it was like, I don't know, something really took place within me, within my mind-body energy, like in Japanese sanmitsu, mind-body energy or mind-body speech. And I thought, wow, I want what he has. And then I started to have very specific experiences with my practice of the system of Reiki, and I didn't really know what it was. And I talked to a Buddhist in the Himalayas, and he said, oh, are you practicing Buddhist teachings? And I go like, I don't really know. And so that really triggered a research for me on where actually does the system of Reiki come from. And so in 2001, I went for the first time to Japan, met with Japanese Reiki teachers. What was interesting, but I still felt something was missing. And so I went back to Japan again and again and again. And finally, in 2012, I met up and became a student of a Japanese priest. And that really helped me to understand even more so the interconnectedness of the Buddhist teachings and the system of Reiki. And for me, what I really like about the system of Reiki, particularly from the more traditional Japanese perspective, is the no dogma, and kind of that it has been simplified It's still very tricky, but simplified so that we don't need to become a monk or a nun, and yet we can lay bare our kindness, our human nature, or Buddha nature.
How do normal people benefit from Reiki?
So for me, of course, people can do hands-on healing, but ultimately, and therefore we can see very lot of links to, for example, the concept of kaji in Japan. When you go to a temple, you can receive kaji from a priest or priestess, a blessing, empowerment. And to be able to do this, the priest or the priestess need to train a lot, right? Ultimately, lay bare their Buddha nature, their luminosity. So if I'm still in the dark with a lot of anger and worry and fear and try to do hands-on healing on someone, is not as profound that if I can really emanate a lot of light. What is that light? Again, love and compassion and kindness. Then that energy can also emanate not just from my hands, but from my whole being. And we kind of know that when you see some of those monks or nuns or priests or priestesses in Japan, you come into their being, or you're close to that, and you start to feel already very calm. There is a certain rub-off effect, so to speak. And through practicing very specific meditations, hands-on healing on ourselves, mantras, working with symbols to be mindful so that we do not get distracted by past, present, future, receiving and practicing these Reiju or Kaji practices, then we start to feel less angry, less worried, less fearful in our life. And that, of course, will have an effect on my physical body. That, of course, has an effect on my energy. So therefore, I start to feel healthier. From that space, we can maybe, and that is not for everybody, we might be able to do hands-on healing on other people to help them. But ultimately, we can only really help ourselves, right? So for me, the system of Reiki is like Buddhism. We can go to a priest for a blessing or an empowerment or a teaching, but we have to go home and we have to realize that we are Fudomyo, that we are Dainichi no Rei, that we are this great bright light, that our mind is stable as a mountain.
Wow, wow. Can you tell us a little bit more about the hands-on healing?
Yeah, so hands-on healing is actually, in a way, it's quite simple. For me, hands-on healing is ultimately a birthright. So if you fall over, of course, what you're going to do, you put your hands on someone. But as I said, when I met this young Buddhist practitioner, reincarnated Lama in the Himalayas, and he put his hands towards me, it was very different than I would put, my hand towards someone. And I thought, wow, I want what he is having. And one of the reasons his hands-on healing was so profound because of his direct experience of his true nature or Buddha nature. I also worked with a Taoist priest, and she also, her hands-on healing was quite amazing. And so therefore, to really benefit from hands-on healing, we first need to make sure that we are not distracted. If I put my hands on you, for example, and I'm being distracted by past, present, future, my mind is distracted, what means my energy is distracted. I'm not focused. So therefore, the first point of call is really to take control over my own mind. Then, of course, that will have an effect on my energy. Then hands-on healing becomes something quite different. So for example, if I would do hands-on healing on myself, like I can touch or work off the body or on the body, it depends on what you're doing. But if I'm distracted and I'm just going like, then not much is happening. But if I if I go more in a focused, mindful way and use my hands for myself, then automatically, slowly, I start to feel more relaxed, more calm, more open, and therefore I can become more compassionate and kind to myself and other people.
Wow.
So in a way, it's actually a mindfulness practice.
Actually, you took me surprised by your movement. Actually, I lost the track of everything.
Yeah, but this is, I sometimes do this, and you know what is interesting to see, and we can see the same when we go to temples or in Japan or even here in Holland to churches, and we see a priest or a priestess performing something. We can learn a ritual, what is wonderful, but the ritual needs to come from that luminosity, from Buddha nature as much as possible. So, for example, also within the Reiki precepts, there is Shinshin Kaizen, the improvement of our mind-body harmony. So if I do, for example, a chanting of a mantra, say maybe Fudomyo or Dainichi no Rei, or maybe the precepts, how we do it in the system of Reiki, then if I chant what is with my body and speech, but if my mind is somewhere else, then my chanting becomes not as clear and direct. So, for example, within the system of Reiki, we chant a precept. So maybe I give an example and I do it. So, Yo dake wa I karuna shimpai suna kansha shite gyo hakame hitoni sensetsu ni. Now I'm distracted. So I was trying to think about something while I'm chanting it. But if I say, okay, let's first put my body, my mind, and my speech in the right place. So what is that right place? Is again like Dainichi no Rei or Fudomyo, stable, luminous, clear. What is that luminosity? If we look at light, it's empty, right? We cannot touch it. So emptiness. So then the chanting becomes more like this. Orake wa I karuna shimpai suna kansha shite gyo akeme ito ni sensetsu ni. Yorake wa I karuna shinpai suna kansha shite gyo akeme ito ni sensetsu ni. Yorake wa I karuna shinpai suna kansha shite gyo akeme ito ni sensetsu. So then, of course, is a very different quality.
Speechless. Well, you showed us some example. You show us an example of Reiki practice, chanting. Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
Yeah, some of the practices of is again really tricky. One very interesting practice you also have what is almost very similar as some of kototama, for example, in Japanese. So we can also see that certain aspects the teacher, the founder of the system of Reiki, took also from Shintoism. So one mantra we use in the system of Reiki, and again, not many modern teachers or even Japanese teachers use this, but traditionally it was like this, and it's O-U-A-E, like that's the vowels. And again, you do this kind of chanting, but again, like if I want to chant a Heart Sutra or any of the Buddhist mantras like Fudomyo or Dainichi no Rei, then I need to make sure I do it from the right place, right? We train our mind in mindfulness, so that in my daily life I can be mindful. Mindful of what? Not being distracted by past, present, future, because else I become angry or worried or fearful. So another of these mantras is like, and through practicing these mantras or these hands-on healing on ourselves, these very specific meditations, then of course we lay bare more and more our inner luminosity, our Buddha nature. And through that, then our life becomes more like Buddha nature, more compassionate and kind.
I can see this is the whole system. It's not only about the hands-on healing. I got it.
Yeah, it is. It's in a way, it's a whole system. And unfortunately, when it moved from Japan to the West, it became really only focused on hands-on healing. But traditionally, it was more a spiritual practice to really lay bare again, you know, that luminosity, your great bright light, Buddha nature, or however we call it, it doesn't matter, so that we can be just a better human being.
Wonderful. Yes, we learned a lot today. Excellent. So yes, we would love to know more about you. So if you have a website or social media information, or maybe you have a book that you published, please tell us. We want to know more about you.
Yeah, my first book actually came out in 2003, I think. So I have quite a few books. That is the Reiki Source Book, The Japanese Art of Reiki, Reiki Insights, The Inner Heart of Reiki. My new book is coming out early next year, hopefully in January, is The Way of Reiki. And that really talks about the links between the Buddhist practices and the system of Reiki, and how that really can help us to lay bare our luminosity, that Buddha nature. And my website is www.ihreiki.com. IH stands for International House of Reiki. I've got Facebook, Frans Stiene, or International House of Reiki, also on Instagram, Frans Stiene. So you can find me everywhere. One important element for me is really to, on my website, on my social media, to also promote this Japanese culture and heritage of the system of Reiki, and, you know, like things you do, for example, because it's so important these days that we become actually more compassionate. We live in a very difficult world ultimately, and it's not always easy. So it doesn't matter ultimately how we do it and what we practice. We can say I'm a Buddhist, but one important teachings I once got away many, many years ago about Buddhism. And this was in the Himalaya where I lived. And I went to a little cafe each day to have a coffee or chai. And there was a lot of Western Buddhists, and they all had their hair shaved and, you know, like robes. And they were all arguing with each other. Now, my Buddha is better than your, my teaching is better than your. And it was a bit confusing for me because it was the beginning of my journey. So then I went to a Buddhist teacher. He was a Rinpoche in Tibetan Buddhism. But for me, it's exactly the same as in Japanese Buddhism, of course. And he gave me this wonderful teaching. And I said to him, well, is this normal that we have these arguments between different Buddhist teachings and sects and, you know, and he said, Frans, how do you spot a real Buddhist? And I go, I don't really know. And he said, you grab a plank, hit them on the head and see what their reaction is. And that for me is so important. What is the reaction? Can we react with love and kindness instead of with anger or fear or worry or any other kind of mean, then we can really say, oh, I'm a good Buddhist, right? I'm a good Buddhist practitioner, because even if someone says, oh, your Buddhist teaching stinks, I can react with kindness and love, because my mind is stable as Fudomyo. My mind can incorporate these kind of insults from whoever about our teachings or about our life or about who we are or what we wear, so that we can be loving, compassion, and kindness. That for me is really Dainichi no Rei. Dainichi no Rei, that cosmic emptiness where we can accommodate everything.
Wow, excellent. So you guys, if you think this information is useful, make sure to subscribe my YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and like me on my Facebook, because that's how we do it in the 21st century. So thank you so much, Master Stiene, for coming here and to talk to us about the system of Reiki and Buddhism.
Thank you.